How's it going, everybody? Today in this video I'm going to show you how to set up a secondary domain controller. It's good for redundancy and backup just in case your primary domain controller was to fail. So just couple things here. So this is my primary domain controller. You can see it up here in the name, Tech DC01. It already is a member of the domain, obviously. It has Active Directory installed. I gave it a static IP address, which is good for any server. You don't want to have a dynamically IP address. You could set one up in DHCP and give it a reservation and all that, but it's best practice to have a statically assigned IP address right here, which means this will not change. There's no DHCP giving this out. It's just 10.10.10.10. That's it. Okay, so now that we got that, we need to make sure that our two computers can speak to each other. Okay, so on my secondary domain controller, I'm just going to close down my primary because we really don't need it for the rest of this little exercise. So on my secondary domain controller, you can see my IP address is 10.10.10.11. It's not a member of techknowledge.com or tech.net, sorry. It's just workgroup. But we can do all that while we set it up. I just want to make sure that we can talk to our primary domain controller. So just give it a quick little ping. This should be reply. Yeah, reply. Okay, so we got communication. Everything else is set up. We got our our statically assigned IP address. If you don't know how to do that, you can just open up Server Manager, which I'm in right now. Click on View Network Connections. Then you'll see your network, your NIC card. You can right click, go to Properties, go down to IP version 4. You can pretty much disable 6 for now if you want, because we haven't set up 6. So IP version 4, hit Properties, and then change Obtain automatically to use the following, and then just fill in the information. Okay? So moving on, we're just going to start with the installation. So there's two ways of doing this. You can either go right to command prompt and type DC promo and hit enter, and it will install, you know, like the framework 3.5 if you don't have it. It will install the binaries for Active Directory. It's not going to make it a domain controller, it's just going to set up Active Directory pretty much. Or you can go to roles in Server Manager, go to add roles, hit next here on the welcome page, select Active Directory Domain Services, hit next. This is like an introduction to Active Directory. There's a couple links you can read over just to familiar yourself with it and things to take note. Hit next, and from here, if you have a pop-up that requires Framework 3.5 to install, just go ahead and hit Install Features, and then you'll get to this screen, and then just hit Install here. This only takes a few minutes, not even really. All right, so that's done. Don't worry about any warnings here. This is just telling me that my automatic updating is not enabled. Whoop-de-doo. You can hit close. Now don't forget, you still have to run the DC promo to actually promote this to a domain controller. And again, don't worry about all these red X's here you're going to be seeing. It's just because we have not issued the DC promo, and if you click on them, they're just going to, you know, this server is not yet running as a domain controller. Do you want to run DC promo? So you can click this link, or you can go back into command prompt and type DC promo. We'll do that. Okay, so you go DC promo, hit enter, and it's that little first screen that kind of flashed by. It would have hung there if we didn't already install what we just installed. It would have installed all that for us. So just hit next. If you have any Windows NT4 servers or computers or anything on your network back in those days, you might want to read this over. It's a compatibility issues. If you don't have anything like that on your network, don't worry about it, and just click next. So here we're going to choose a deployment. So we're going to choose an existing forest because we already have one. And we're going to add a domain controller to an existing forest. We're not going to create a new domain in an existing forest. What that would do would be, for instance, my domain is tech.net. So if I was to add a new domain, I can create sales.tech.net or products.tech.net. I don't want to do that. I want to add a secondary server in tech.net in case my primary server was to fail. Or you can even set up for load balancing if it's a huge company and you don't want to stress out your primary domain controller. You can have, you know, clients reading from the secondary as well. And so we're going to hit next on add domain controller to an existing domain. Hit next. And we're going to want to type the name of any domain in the forest where you want to install this domain controller. So I want to install it on tech.net as the domain that I want to install it on. And then because my computer is not a member of the domain, I cannot use my currently logged on credentials because it's just a local administrator account. It cannot administer the domain. So I have to set up alternate credentials. From here I can go to there and I can go administrator at tech.net. That will make it the domain administrator. And just give it the password. I really hope I priced that in right. Okay, and hit next. Okay, so now everything's set up. Hit next. It's going to examine, and here we go. Select a domain for this additional domain controller. Obviously right here, tech.net. If you had multiple, you would just choose the one you want to choose. Default first site. I only have the one site. We'll get into sites later on. Sites are just, how can I explain it real simple? They're just a grouping of the same IP addresses. So if you had a bunch of branches, like branch offices in different parts of the world, you know, they had their own IP addressing. Well, you can set up their own sites so that replication can stay segregated within their sites, and then you can set up like bridgehead servers to replicate traffic to the other sites. I know it's getting a little crazy here, but we'll get into sites later on. So for now, just leave it as default first site. Hit next, and I do want to make it a DNS, and I will make it a global catalog. It's a backup domain controller in case my primary domain controller was to fail. It says I don't need one on server 1. But like I said, this is for fault tolerance here. So I'm going to make this DNS and global catalog. Next. Just going to examine the DNS. What this is just warning you about is there's no delegation for this DNS because there is no DNS server yet on this computer. So it's going to make one. So it's just kind of warning you. So just hit yes. Okay, now your database, log files, and sysvol folders. Recommendations are to put these on each file actually on a separate drive. So, you know, put one on drive E, you know, P and F, I don't know, whatever drive letters you want to use. And it's just as simply as either changing it, you know, physically like this, or going into the to the browse and just browse into it. But for my testing purposes, I'm just going to leave them all on the same drive here, and I'm going to hit next. And this is for recovery mode if you ever have to restore your server, or there's a few other things you can do on here that needs to be ran in directory services restore mode. DSRM is what it's referred to sometimes. So keep this password handy because you will need it. I believe like when you want to do like offline defragmentations and all that, you need to run it in DSRM. There's a few other things. I can't really think of them off the top of my head right now, but I know there's a few other things that you will run in DSRM. So keep this password handy. For testing, I just make it the same as all my other passwords. So hit next, and then we can hit next. and it's going to join the domain. It's going to create a secondary domain controller, and because we're not making a standard user account or computer account, it's going to put the computer object right into the proper OU. It's not going to put it here in computers, where like the worst place you can put in a computer object. It's going to put it here in domain controllers. As soon as it's done, as you can see, there's only the one tech DC01, and that's done. I will resume the video. Alright, so the domain controller has finished installing. It's rebooted. So now we're here at the login screen. Control Delete, and notice here it says tech/administrator. Well, tech is the name of this computer, and the administrator is the local account, so we don't want to log in as that. Oops. Switch users and type in administrator at tech.net, and it's just going to build your profile for the first time. And you should also see the computer generating here. There you go. So it's acting as a global catalog. It's a domain controller. And there you have it. Got your users and computers. So everything worked out. So as you can see now, you're part of the domain, tech.net. Got your IP address. Got your roles here. So Active Directory, DNS. There's just a few warnings about them. There's nothing you really have to fix. There's just like warnings about communicating with the primary domain controller. You know, it failed and then it initialized, stuff like that. So that's how to add a secondary domain controller to your domain to set up redundancy and fault tolerance. I hope that helped, and thanks for listening.